this is a nation of entrepreneurs. But when it comes to growing that enterprise, scaling it up into something else, the investment, the fund is nowhere to be seen.
Welcome to VoxDevTalks. My name is Tim Phillips. As aid programs are cut across the developing world, we are looking again at what investors can do to help create economic growth. Someone who knows all about this is Yonas Alemu, the CEO of Lovegrass Ethiopia, which creates products from teff, a gluten-free grain that's native to Ethiopia, and sells them across the world. He left a career in investment banking to create this business in the country of his birth, and he has strong views on how entrepreneurship can stimulate positive change. He joins me now from Addis. Yonas, welcome to VoxDevTalks.
Thank you, Tim. How are you doing?
Good, thank you very much. And thank you for joining me despite power cuts, I believe, that are going on at the moment. So let's hope we make it through.
I'm sure we will. We'll be just fine.
First of all, how's the business going at the moment?
Thank you for asking. The business is doing very, very well. We've gone through lots of ups and downs. We've made it through that cut-off period, 5 years. Once you go past 5 years, it's going to be a positive sign. And we've survived COVID, we've survived many big milestones. So we're doing very well. We're growing.
So let's go back to the beginning of your story. You were born in rural Ethiopia. What was life like for you growing up there?
Well, I grew up in a rural village, a farming village in northern Ethiopia, with a region of very few means. Now, knowing a lot that I know about abundance, the excesses with all my travels. But I never felt poor. There was a lot of love involved. My father was a very respected farmer in the local area. He was pretty much the only one who could read and write but through his religious education. But they brought us up with a lot of love. And more importantly, thanks to my mom and dad, a lot of appreciation for education and just exploration and just inquisitiveness, inquiry generally. So that helped a lot in my adult life, I have to say. But normal African farming household, taking care of cattle, waking up early in the morning with your cattle, late night guarding your cattle, staring in the beautiful equatorial skies. Yeah, that's quite a fond memories, actually. Very fond memories.
Well, one thing that was not normal in your life is that you came to Europe to study. How did that happen?
I did, yeah, that's true. There was no high school in the small village that I lived in. So
right.
I had to come to Addis, the capital city. I did my high school there. Then when I finished high school, I won a scholarship to go to Bulgaria. That's where I went. I went to Sofia University. I'm showing my age here. It was a long, long time ago. So in 88, that was communist countries used to give scholarship to each other, to a lot of African students and students from all around the world. That's how I made it to Europe. When communism fell apart, I got another scholarship to the UK. That's how I ended up in the UK as the African Educational Trust gave me a scholarship. That's my journey there.
And after university, you definitely left communism behind because you took a job in investment banking, didn't you? What sort of jobs were you doing in investment banking?
I did electrical and electronics engineering. So when I finished, I worked for a financial risk management company called Mises, a big company,
yes,
a software company. I joined actually as a programmer because in my electrical engineering, I did some C++, some programming stuff. So I joined Mises. There they have a quantitative finance team. And obviously the money is in banking. Everyone knows it. So the desire to go to banking was really, really, really big. But I don't have any knowledge of finance. And my friends in the quantitative finance team told me, if you understand this kind of thick mathematical books and stochastic calculus and whatever stuff, you can make it. there is a certification called Financial Risk Manager from an institute called Global Association of Risk Professionals. I took that certification. I passed it with a good performance. And I joined the quantitative finance team at Mises. And then I ended up after that to BNP Paribas in their interest rate derivatives desk. And then I moved to the commodities desk in JP Morgan and at Credit Suisse in credit derivatives desk. I jumped a few places, but I stayed the longest at Credit Suisse. It was my favorite bank. Sadly, it's gone now.
Yes, and by 2016, though, Credit Suisse, you decided to leave, having done all this time.
I did.
Why did you decide to leave Credit Suisse?
For me, like growing up in Ethiopia, it just left an indelible kind of scar for me in a good way. In a sense, I go there to visit family regularly. My life has pretty much transformed. I live a very different life. Married in the UK with kids grown. I was a VP at Credit Suisse, very well paid. Life has moved on really nicely. But I go back home to my village and things have just barely moved on. And there was a certain time around 2014, I just couldn't make it anymore. I couldn't fake it. It was almost faking it because I was really, really preoccupied by the purpose of it all. So it was really tough, actually. I mean, it was times when I used to go in the underground, going to Canary Wharf. That's where our office was. Here I am, my stomach is full and things are okay. What contribution have I made to the people that I left behind? So, there was a lot of guilt involved. And around 2015, my wife, who's also in the insurance industry in finance, she just said, look, if I'm to stop you from going back, you'll never forgive me. So just abandon everything and just go back and do whatever you want to do. She was incredibly cooperative. So it was a bit crazy. Yeah.
I can understand you feeling the huge difference between somewhere like Canary Wharf and when you go home to Ethiopia, but having decided then to go back and start something, be an entrepreneur in Ethiopia, what skills did you think that you could bring from Canary Wharf that would be relevant there?
I wish I calculated it and thought about it in the way you just put it. The honest truth is, what triggered it really in the end was, this tiny Ethiopian seed called teff, which is similar to quinoa nutritionally in Latin America, Andes, Bolivia, Peru. In Ethiopia, we have this tiny little seed called teff. That is a staple in Ethiopia. For a lot of people who know Ethiopia, you just can't escape it because that's what we eat for breakfast. It's black bread called injera. And I actually grew up farming teff. And of course, knowing what I know, the growth of the popularity of quinoa, I started seeing teff in some health food shops in Canary Wharf and Whole Foods, etc. everywhere. And when I started reading, there was some patent issue going on by some Dutch investors, businessmen. So teff was patented by this guy. So Ethiopia, pretty much me, my family, were not allowed to commercialize Ethiopia and use it to any industrial output like pasta, breakfast cereal, anything other than the traditional injera, Ethiopian injera that we use it for. To me, that was pretty much where the guilt element came. Initially, just blaming the government or whoever allowed it, etc. And then the realization came, it's the likes of me who can really make the change. Because in the first place, the very reason why they managed to get hold of this patent was because of this benefit sharing scheme. The government agreed with them. So you just start to question it. Why would a big nation like Ethiopia of 100 plus million population go into a benefit sharing scheme of its such a core ingredient like teff? Some small businessmen in the Netherlands. And the honest truth is because there was no institutional capacity in the country to be able to do that. And we used to build that institutional capacity within the likes of me. So that's where I just almost took it personally that this is my mission. That's it. I've got to do something about it. So it wasn't financial risk management, it wasn't my FRM certification or my PRP certification or my quantitative knowledge I was going to bring to Ethiopia. No. I was in a completely different field altogether. I mean, we just set out a mission. We wrote what I call that the 3 tenets of Lovegrass and registered the name, and I just jumped out and I ended up in Ethiopia.
So you're setting up this business in Ethiopia to make products using teff.
Yes.
What was the experience of setting up business in Ethiopia?
Well, let me just say, in a very short way, it wasn't smooth, okay? It wasn't smooth. First of all, it was a very turbulent time when I came.
There was martial law in 2016, wasn't there?
Honestly, a lot of people were telling me, are you crazy? I have something, you've lost your marbles. Everyone is trying to escape the country and you're trying to go there. Now I almost wonder sometimes, would I do it now? It's a bit strange. Then I was ready to jump through any hula hoop to really try that out. So getting land was a problem. Land is state-owned. You probably know in Ethiopia, freehold land is for the state. So you have to get lease permission. You have to convince the people in authority that I'm really not lying. I'm not trying to make money out of land. I'm really trying to do this. So they did trust me. They gave me the land, but it took a long time. It took me around 1.5 years to actually start going.
Mm-hmm.
So for someone who was as busy as I was at Canary Wharf, to just sit and do little for almost 1.5 years was pretty hard.
And I guess having familiarity with Ethiopia, even if there were institutional problems that you knew about, that must have helped.
Oh, God, yes. Yes, I mean, I can't imagine one of my British or French or whatever colleagues ever making the path that I followed. There has to be something above and beyond, something really a calling, if you like. I don't want to make it that big, but really something like that you believe in for you to go past through it, through that kind of stuff. No was never no for me, and I was ready to go through anything. I know nothing about manufacturing. Think about it. I mean, I am literally zero. All I know is I want to transform this thing, set 3 values for the company, i.e. build a factory that whose products can compete internationally. That was my first tenet, the mission. Mm-hmm. The factory has to be in Ethiopia, and the name has to be Lovegrass Ethiopia, the trading name. So none of this gimmicky, made in Africa, proudly, this and that. But literally, that's it. We are an Ethiopian manufacturer. The second one is malnutrition. Malnutrition is a big deal for me. So how can we come up with product that we can show we can fight malnutrition? And the third one was the farmers. Mm-hmm. The farming community in Ethiopia, you travel around the country, you still see people ox lowing, same way it was during biblical times, by and large. That's how the community lives. So that's how I set out those 3 goals. So whatever challenges I was facing, I was just a little blip. I never took it seriously.
You can hardly say that in the time since it's been smooth sailing for you. That political instability in Ethiopia has persisted for a lot of the time that you have been investing there. Also, we did have the small matter of COVID as well, didn't we?
Yes.
How did you manage the business through all of that?
Well, think about it. For a banker who knows nothing about food processing and suddenly had to be an expert in extrusion, in pasta making or breakfast cereal. And not even just wheat pasta. It has to be gluten-free, teff pasta nobody has ever done before, breakfast cereals from teff and things like that. So it was an incredibly difficult thing, even technically, from a business point of view, and I'm not a business leader either, for that matter. It hasn't been easy at all. But when COVID came, somehow, with a bit of luck, with a bit of this and that, I managed to select machinery, the factory was built, the compound was constructed, the warehouses, etc. And we had the machinery from the port in containers. The moment it arrived at the warehouse, COVID hit.
Ethiopia has today recorded its first confirmed case of coronavirus, bringing to 13 the number of countries in Africa that have confirmed cases of the COVID-19.
My wife calls me, she was in the UK, of course, with the kids. And, I had to literally lock everything and go back to the UK.
Well, it's an inspiring story, and we are going to find out a little bit about what you think we can learn from it in a second.
My name is Oliver Honey. I'm the managing editor here at VoxDev, and I'm here to give our VoxDev Lits a short plug. We now have 14 available on our website and the same amount currently underway. VoxDevlits from VoxDev are easy to read, policy-oriented literature reviews that will help you to stay informed. In each VoxDevlit, experts in their field distill the evidence on important questions in development economics.
What's interesting is that it is actually trying to do different things.
Time we answer a question, it raises one or two more.
From agriculture to trade, from bureaucracy to mobile money, VoxDevlits are open access, accessibly written, policy-focused and regularly updated. Find them at voxdev.org/VoxDevlit.
This is a really interesting set of questions. It opens up a whole can of worms.
And stay tuned for our upcoming release on electricity infrastructure and an update to our VoxDevlit on the informal sector.
Okay, Yonas, let's talk about the bigger picture here. You support what you call impact investment rather than I'm doing air quotes here, charity mindset. So tell me about what you think this charity mindset is and who suffers from it.
I need to tell you how my opinions of charity and investment and entrepreneurship generally, where it comes from.
Yes.
I am lucky enough to have gone through a lot in terms of geography and economic situations, etc., of countries living in different areas of the world. And I grew up during the time of Live Aid. That still lives with us.
Yes.
Here is a very, very proud society, poor though it may be, where I came from in my village. People are incredibly poor, Where I grew up, my word is my bond, as we say in banking. A handshake is like a contract. People are incredibly proud people. And then suddenly I came to Bulgaria and I realized how the world perceives Ethiopia. Certainly, even to this day, I lived most of my adult life in Europe. Nobody sees Ethiopia as a place to invest, a place that can grow. Nobody thinks of the society as a society that's striving to lift itself out of poverty. And that, in my opinion, is a manifestation. It's a big sense of the kinds of Live Aid and the kind of imagery that's been etched in the minds of especially people in Europe and the US.
The situation in Ethiopia has gone well beyond the stage at which words like tragedy and disaster have any meaning. It's a situation that's out of the control of the government here or of the international voluntary agencies.
I have just been wondering all the time, how is that kind of mindset to help society to lift itself out of poverty? Otherwise, you end up in this recurring nightmare of poverty, charity, hunger, etc. So that is where my opinion is formed. There is, of course, when there is natural disaster like the hunger or earthquake or tornado, whatever it may be, sure, and when your house is on fire, we run around to put it out. Charity, in that sense, has a place and time for it. But every society aspires to grow. That message need to be passed there. I have never known of a country that make it out of poverty through pure charity, the kind of charity you just send sacks of grain, whatever, to the country. So that's why I think people need to appreciate, you need to back them to grow. It's aspiring just like any other society.
We should explain to our younger listeners just how important Live Aid was for fixing an opinion of Ethiopia and a lot of sub-Saharan Africa in people's minds during the 1980s. Giant charity push to try and alleviate the problems of drought. But there was also the problem that it portrayed Africa as helpless.
Absolutely. People still talk about Live Aid. It's insane.
40 years ago.
40 years ago.
Yes.
People still talk about Live Aid. Marshall Plan helped Europe out of the disaster the Second World War brought. Now, the Marshall Plan was about building manufacturing capacity in Europe. It was about opening markets for European produce. It was about leveling up It wasn't about feeding them permanently, just sending them sacks of grain. Why is Africa, in this case Ethiopia, any different? One needs to come to Addis, where I am now, understand the vibrancy and the restless souls of the youth that I meet every day, the entrepreneurs who are starving of funding and that seed finance, nevertheless fighting to make it. On that context is what we need to see, whether one need to send charity. I hate that term.
Yes, by contrast, you would prefer what you have called impact investment. How would you define impact investment?
Any form of investment that aims to build capacity in a country, to me, that's an impact investment. Mm-hmm. Of course, you can invest in a country and it could be one of those we expect unreasonable return and then just almost rent-seeking, if you like.
Yeah.
But most investments who support local growth, local manufacturing, the transfer of knowledge to that idea, just in my opinion, seeing this region, this continent, as a continent with opportunities whereby enterprise can grow, profit could be made. To me, that mindset is an impact investment mindset.
And so who are the impact investors in this context? Is it expats like yourselves, entrepreneurs? Is it the domestic government? Can they be an impact investor? Is it a foreign government, the multilateral banks? Can they do it? Who has the knowledge and the talent?
We've got a lot of examples over the last few decades, even in our own lifetime, on how countries have lifted themselves in a massive way out of poverty. It would be wrong for anybody to assume that cannot happen in Africa. It's really totally wrong. And the role of all of those that you just mentioned is really, really powerful. The diaspora, in my opinion, has a huge role to play. It's almost a bridge, especially for a country like Ethiopia, whereby it's pretty isolated because it wasn't colonized. And it's a mountainous country with very little communication with the outside world. And the likes of me in diaspora, even by virtue of coming and just virtually questioning everything, you just perturb a thought process that's been lingering there forever. And people think a different way of looking at the world. And of course, the amount of investment that can flow through the diaspora, there is a lot more involved in it. It is about our families, about our heritage, about everything. And then the lessons learned wherever we live in are invaluable in a country like this. So the diaspora can play a huge role, in my opinion. But of course, virtually everyone else must see this is a continent with huge opportunities. In my opinion, we need to talk about purely on opportunity spaces. The reason I'm saying that, I go to, supermarkets in Addis here, and I see everything virtually imported, and it just frustrates me. 100+ million population, so little investment, so little really well-matured economy other than traditional farming. That vacuum, to me, all those problems are opportunities. That's what entrepreneurship is. You can solve so many big societal problems for anyone interested, and at the same time make infinite amount of money. There is huge opportunity consumer-wise, huge opportunity copy whatever is happening in the rest of the world and bringing it here. But all that can only happen if there is that seed investment, that belief that this is a continent that can grow, that can change. Whatever happens in China, in Korea, Taiwan, whatever, can be replicated here. And I see no reason. I have never seen any other evidence. Why not? 100 meters from where I stay now in Addis, I will see young ladies making coffee on the street. Some guy on a wheelbarrow carrying banana. This is a nation of entrepreneurs. But when it comes to growing that enterprise, scaling it up into something else, the investment, the fund is nowhere to be seen because nobody thinks it could turn into big business.
You're very clear that your inspiration is your heritage, your respect for the people that you grew up with, those people that you see on the street. Not all investors have the same values, and in any investment relationship, then they really hold all the cards. So how important is it to build into that relationship respect for local people and their skills? And how can you do that in the business relationship?
I don't believe in changing society all in one go. You just cannot. You just need to tell good stories. There are some good stories. If you open YouTube and all you see is people begging to save a child or something like that. No, there are lots of success stories in Africa. If the right investment, I can almost guarantee, if we were to do some analysis of how much of investment on relative basis in Africa is successful, I'm pretty sure it's probably the best continent in the world. What I'm talking about are those good stories are rarely told. I see my own experience. I mean, okay, I was naive, ignorance is bliss. I jumped into this in a cavalier fashion almost, but still with all the commitment, the business is where it is. But I have proven that we can produce in a small village up on the hills of Addis, where I'm now, and take it to London, compete. And we are the gold medal winners on the free from competition in London, in Cial, Paris, on pasta, and etc. And this can be done. And throughout this time, I have never received a penny of investment from anybody. The reason for this success is availability of cheap raw material, the availability of cheap resource, and the desire for people to learn. Why can we not tell the story of what can be done? We have 120 million population to support here market-wise. The whole of the world out there to support. There is cheap labor. I don't know any other region of the world that can compete. Not just the on price basis, but the desire to work, to learn. If you come to my factory, you will go back shocked as to how keen everybody is. And these are not food processing experts. These are people I picked from everywhere, from construction companies everywhere. We trained them. My point is there is a lot of good stories to tell. Again, forget the charity element. We need to evaluate the opportunities purely on what they can offer on opportunity basis, and forget about this nonsense that this is just a land of poverty. Completely the opposite.
We'll discuss how we can incentivize that inward investment in a second. So, Yonas, I understand what you're saying about the potential of Ethiopia, but it also has a recent history of conflict and instability. Thinking about Ethiopia's institutions now, how long do you think it will be until it has the stability to attract investment on that scale, the scale that you would like?
It's not all perfectly paved road for entrepreneurs here.
Yeah.
Is there such a place? We could argue the leveling the country had with charity, poverty, disturbances, etc., is probably the reason why there are so many opportunities too. Problems for an entrepreneur literally equate to opportunities. There are huge, virtually everywhere you look, hardly anything is done. If we are to wait until everything is paved and beautiful for investors to come, then that just won't happen. Frankly, I have lived most of my life in Europe. I have seen business opportunities in Europe. And I also see business opportunities here. Do they compare? Absolutely not. In my opinion, anybody with a bit of investment and entrepreneurial flair can make it here. There is so much to do. Mm-hmm. But having said that, should there be changes around governance and around the rule of law? Of course, I mean, there's so many areas that need changing. But this is, it's kind of a vicious circle. Poverty always leads to this as well. And in my opinion, what has been going on in Ethiopia over the last 4 or 5 years has been phenomenal. The biggest problem with foreign currency control, they have liberalized that, they devalued the currency, which was a big issue. It's not a highly indebted country relative to other countries as well, to be fair. And the way they managed to control inflation, in my opinion, is almost textbook. Really, really commendable. Of course, this is a country that imports most of its consumables and exports very, very little. And that's why I'm here. And in a country like that, of course, you end up with this huge balance of payment deficit and foreign currency issues. So they had to put foreign currency control. So for a lot of investors, that's, of course, a negative. But they are loosening that up and it's getting a lot better. I think investors need to come, for the long-term investors especially. It's a booming economy.
So if I understand you, the investment's likely to be volatile, but you're making a long-term bet on those institutional improvements and progress in that direction.
Very, very true. That's exactly the case. But In my opinion, those who are brave enough to be the first to be here, I see a lot of success stories as far as I'm concerned. I see a lot of companies who have invested here very, very short time. And by the way, the kind of return we talk about is pretty dramatic returns. A very rapidly growing economy, huge consumer base, but nothing manufactured locally, an agrarian society.
It's not globally the best time to be growing a business, is it? There are lots of geopolitical tensions at the moment. There are trade conflicts as well. Can countries like Ethiopia rely on export partners like Europe and the United States, which is a traditional, or is regional growth likely to be more important?
Look, the honest truth is I never believed countries like Ethiopia really relied on other markets for their exports. It's quite interesting, actually. I remember during 2008, after the credit crisis in Europe and the US, I was still in the bank at Credit Suisse and we were going up and down, working late night. And when I come here, what I noticed is it really doesn't make any difference. There is hardly any correlation.
Yeah.
In the region where I go, in the areas where I came from, in a rural area where you go, the potato come from the garden. And what does it matter? It's not correlated at all. So did Ethiopia depend on other markets as such for its growth? For which exports? There's hardly any. Frankly, it reminds me of a saying in Ethiopia, whether there are 100 cows milking cows in the household or only one cow. The cat only gets a small milk in a small pot. So whatever happens around the world, of course, there will be a small impact here and there. But I think that can only change when Ethiopia starts to build its own capacity and start exporting. And that's where these things start to matter. Right now, I also have my own opinions of for how long this global turmoil is going to continue.
You're probably well off that you're not in the investment banking business anymore.
Yes.
Yonas, it's an inspiring story and we wish you luck. Thank you very much for talking about it today.
Thank you so much, Tim. Much appreciated.
If you want to find out about Lovegrass Ethiopia, then the website is thelovegrass, all one word, thelovegrass.com. And you can find out about the products, which look great, and also the story of the company. This has been a VoxDev Talk, the best way to make sure you don't miss an episode. Follow us. You find us wherever you get your podcasts. Our past episodes, as always, are at VoxDev.org, where there are articles about the topics we feature. And if you like what you hear, then please share it with someone. Leave us a review as well. VoxDev Talks is a Talk Normal production. The assistant producer is Megan Bieber, and our editor is Andrei Zargarian. Thanks to Oliver Haney and Iman Siddiq at VoxDev.